Good evening. Welcome to the final reading of our week one of the Tin House 2020 Summer Workshop online. It's been a fiction week this week, and so we're very excited to be ending with three fantastic fiction and nonfiction writers. We're going to be featuring three of our faculty this evening: Kristen Arnett, Brandon Taylor, and Nicole Dennis-Benn. I want to welcome them all three, as well as our interpreters Rory and Mac, who've been with us all week. It's been a real pleasure to be working beside them as well, and we thank them for joining us. It's really nice to welcome Kristen to the workshop stage. Some of you may have heard earlier this week during her conversation, first encountered Kristen when she was a student at Tin House and working on her first collection. So to have it come full circle is a real honor. Kristen Arnett is, of course, the New York Times bestselling author of her debut novel, Mostly Dead Things, put out by Tin House in 2019. She was awarded 9th Letters Literary Award in Fiction and is a columnist for Lit Hub. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, The Normal School, Gulf Coast, Electric Lit, and elsewhere. Her story collection, the one she was working on at Tin House, Felt in the Jaw, was published by Split Lip Press and was awarded the 2017 Coyle Book Award. And right now she is in Las Vegas as a spring 2020 Shearing Fellow at Black Mountain Institute. I know from past conversations and interviews that Kristen has done how much of an influence and inspiration Dorothy Allison is on her work. And when I think of Dorothy Allison, who we kind of call one of the fairy godmothers of Tin House. She was been with us from one of our first workshops and is a great supporter of the program. So shout out to Dorothy. When I think of Dorothy, I think of the following quote: "Write the story that you were always afraid to tell. I swear to you that there's magic in it. And if you show yourself naked for me, I'll be naked for you. It will be our covenant." Kristen, I think as Dorothy entered into a pact with a generation of readers, particularly queer working class women, your work has had a similar effect of making people right now feel a little less alone in the world. And for that and for so many other reasons, I'm proud to call you a friend and introduce you as our first reader tonight. Kristen Arnett.
Don't make me cry, asshole. Thank you so much, Lance, and thank you, Tin House, and thank you, India, and thank you to everyone who was here this week. I have to tell you, Tin House means so much to me, not even just from a standpoint of my book being published by them, but yeah, from being a workshop student at Tin House in person. Like, I felt such a kinship and connection to being able to be part of this workshop week. I feel so lucky. My reading tonight is dedicated also to my workshop group. Shout out to my novel workshop group. You all were so thoughtful and terrific and kind. And I feel like, I said this earlier on Twitter, but I feel like a better person and a better writer from interacting with your work this week. So thank you to everyone here. Thank you to all going to the student readings this week, going to hear the student readings that were online. That's some of the best readings I've heard all year. Truly, like the level of talent that's here, I can't gush enough about the work that you all are doing. I'm so impressed and feel lucky to be in conversation with you. I will stop gushing. Thank you last to Brandon Taylor and Nicole Dennis-Benn, who I am super fans of. So I feel very lucky to be able to read with you both tonight. I'm going to read from the opening to my next novel, which is called Samson. It'll be out next year, sometime from Riverhead. We'll see when that will be. I'm going to read off my screen, so it's going to look like I'm reading in very longingly into your eyes, either that or very creepily. You be the judge. So I'm going to just go ahead and lean in. And thank you also to our interpreters tonight. I want to say also to Rory and to Mac. You have made things like so much more accessible for people, and I appreciate it. Thank you. The man took her son's hand and walked casually toward the playground exit. Sammy had left him on the swings. He'd just learned to work it himself without her pushing, which was a relief, so she let him stay on for a few more minutes while she cleaned up and gathered their things. She'd said, "I'll be right back," and "Keep pumping your legs, you're doing great." And then she'd walk down to the gate that led to the main exit, passing a woman with a double stroller bogged down in diaper bags and a kid so big their legs hung down either side. It was stiflingly hot outside, even though it was already December, and the woman was huffing and puffing to navigate the silty dirt with all that weight. She had on a pink visor with a palm tree and the word Orlando embroidered underneath it in cursive script, which Sammy found extremely tacky. She was muttering something like many, many, or maybe money, money. It sounded like crazy person gibberish. Sammy hurried past so she wouldn't have to help. The garbage can near her car was already overflowing and the smell was like rancid milk, so she wadded up the paper bag that held her son's half-eaten lunch and she put it on the front seat. It was so scorching inside the closed car that she stood there with the doors open for a minute and let the heat roil out because Samson would cry if he felt sticky, and she was too tired to deal with it. A cloud of gnats circled her head, hungry for the sweat beating up around her neck, and she swatted at them absent-mindedly. Chunks of backwash floated in her son's leftover lemonade. She grimaced before dumping it out on the sun-sticky asphalt. She tossed the bottle on the seat and it rolled off onto the floor. She was going to stoop down to pick it up, but her back hurt, so she didn't. Her back hurt because she'd had to pick up Samson every night for the last 3 months and take him to the bathroom because he kept wetting himself. 4 years old and still wetting the bed, but every child was different. That's what the doctor said. Sammy wasn't sure she believed it. So instead of kneeling down to pick it up, she left the bottle there and turned back around. There was the man, walking away with her son. "Hey," she said, because no other words would come. "Hey." They didn't stop. They didn't walk any faster either, just leisurely strolling toward the exit on the opposite side of the playground. Her son was holding the man's hand as if he'd known him his whole life. The guy didn't look all that weird. He was medium height with thinning dark blonde hair, a scruff of beard, and he wore a gray polo tucked into dark blue jeans, white sneakers. Her son had on khaki shorts and his yellow t-shirt with the cartoon Dalmatian on the front. The shirt said, "Rough and Tumble." His hair was a real cloud of curls from the humidity. It was well past time for a haircut. It was just that Samson threw such a fit every time. She really hated to take him. Sammy jumped the fence. She didn't know she was going to do it until she did it. Didn't even know she could do something like that, not really. She wasn't particularly athletic and her body was small, but she vaulted it and landed directly on the other side. She ran. Mulch flew everywhere, and then one of her sandals fell off and she was running with one shoe on. She passed the mother with the stroller who parked it beside a picnic table in the shade of the park's solitary oak tree. Sammy kept yelling, "Hey," louder and louder, but neither the man or her son looked back. Her son never looked when she called him, never responded to his name or to her commands. The man had taken her son through the gate and they were walking through the adjacent parking lot headed toward a big red truck. She stopped yelling and ran faster. He opened the passenger door and her son stood beside him. She could see the man's lips moving, but she couldn't make out any of the words. Her son, quiet all day, every day, looked up at the man and smiled. Actually smiled, full-on, toothy grin. Sammy started screaming. Not just a scream, a prolonged siren shriek that went up and up at the end, like the wail of an ambulance. Still nothing from the man, nothing from her son. Could anyone hear her? When she finally reached them, the man was buckling Samson into the front seat. She pushed past him and yanked her son out. Her back, already strained, decided to seize, and she crumpled and almost dropped him onto the asphalt, barely hanging onto his arm. She was wheezing, out of breath. Her foot, she realized, was bleeding, and so was her left thigh from which she'd scratched at hurdling the chain link. "You," she said, took a breath, took another breath. "You, my son, you." The man put up his hands, as if to ward her off. Unreal. He was about to abscond with her kid in the middle of the afternoon from a public park, and he was acting like she was the crazy one. She felt crazy. He didn't look like he felt scared at all. In fact, he looked concerned. Up close, she could see that his face was tanned and wrinkled near his deep-set eyes. He looked like the kind of guy who smiled a lot. He looked like someone's nice neighbor. "I was just showing him my truck," he said. "Kid said he liked trucks." Samson was yanking at her hand to get away, and she gripped harder. "Your truck. Your truck. I swear." The man smiled at her, revealing a line of very large, bright teeth, super white teeth, all even, maybe not even real teeth. They had a fake look to them, like they might be dentures. Too perfect for that face with its crooked nose and scratchy beard and smile wrinkles. "I'm calling the police," Sammy said, and then remembered she'd left her phone in her car, along with her car keys, along with all her stuff. Where was her shoe? Halfway across the playground. "Mom," Samson tugged her hand again, sweaty fingers wriggling. It's got a CB radio. She looked down at her kid, and he was looking back at her with that same indifferent look he always had on his face. No grin for mom, even though she'd saved him from imminent danger. No thought at all to how her heart was hammering inside her chest. She could have a heart attack right there in the parking lot, and he'd just climb up into the truck over her downed corpse. One of her toenails had ripped half off, the littlest one, on her right foot, and she was staying in a small puddle of her own blood. I'm calling the cops, she repeated. I'm calling them right now. The man closed the passenger door. Then he skirted the front of the truck and opened the driver's side door. Don't you get in that truck, Sammy yelled. Samson was squirming and she could barely keep a grip on him. She stepped back, dragging her son along with her out of the way of the truck, worried they might both get run over. Don't you dare get in that truck. I am calling the cops and you're going to stay right here. The man didn't look at her. He started the engine and she realized he was going to leave, that he was going to drive away from this, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. Help, she yelled. Samson wriggled and nearly escaped, so she caught his t-shirt by the neck and gripped him there too hard. She knew because he made a squeak and then stopped moving. Someone help me! Child abduction! There wasn't anybody else in the parking lot. She looked around frantically and saw the woman who'd been pushing the stroller with the kid too big for it was setting out a picnic lunch. Only 50 feet away, maybe less, and still the woman didn't acknowledge her screams for help. She stepped back again, a few more feet, still worried the man might decide to plow the truck into them. He didn't. Instead, he eased the truck around Sammy and her son and pulled out of the lot. It was Dodge, and it was a bright, glossy red. She looked for the license plate and started repeating the numbers aloud. GN5 8V6, GN5 8V6, GN5 8V6. Samson hung limp. He always did that when she forced him to do something he didn't want to do, dragging down until it felt like he weighed 1,000 pounds. She kept repeating the license plate numbers as she led them back across the parking lot, headed to the playground. Her hand was clenched around his neck along with a fistful of his t-shirt, and she used her grip to propel him along in front of her. He was barely walking, zombie legs, stumbling. She hissed in pain with every step. There was something in the sole of her foot, glass maybe, and her toe was throbbing and her back hurt so bad she couldn't breathe. It felt like the truck had run her over. When they reached the fence, she yelled at the woman still setting out her food to call 911. Then she sat down right where she stood and wept. Ants, Samson said. He was rubbing at his neck from where Sammy had grabbed him. There was a wild red mark there and his collar was all yanked out. Her son's face was dirty. He could use a wet wipe. The woman came over and handed her a cell phone. I didn't know what to tell them, she whispered, as if the situation were some kind of embarrassing secret. Her own kid was still sitting in the stroller, long legs dangling. The child had on Velcro shoes and kept kicking the sides so that all the bags on top threatened to fall off. She couldn't see their face. She wondered if they had some kind of mental or physical problem that required them to be in a stroller well past the usual age. Sammy gave the dispatcher the license plate number. She called it an attempted abduction. She described what the man looked like, what he'd been wearing. She told them about his 2 perfect teeth, how his truck had a CB radio. She told what she remembered, which wasn't much. She could barely remember her own name. How fast had it all happened? Too quick. It all sped by in a blur. After hanging up, she realized she hadn't taken down any information. She didn't know the dispatcher's name. She'd been talking to a woman. At least she thought it had been a woman with that high-pitched voice. Sammy hadn't given them a number so they could contact her. How'd they reach her? Would she need to call back again and talk to someone else, someone new? Give out the information all over again? Already the license plate number had flown from her brain. Her son was leaning against the fence. He kept saying, ants, ants, and then she felt them crawling up the legs of her shorts. She jumped up and dusted them off, then moved the both of them around the corner to a spot without any bugs. There were hundreds of dandelions peppering the grass. Wild, fluffy things that stirred in the breeze. Instead of touching these pretty things, her child found an abandoned straw from a fast food cup, and she just let him play with it. She was going into shock. She could feel it. Her entire body was shutting down. She was still holding the woman's phone and knew she should call her wife, tell her what happened, but she couldn't remember that number either. Why don't I know my wife's phone number, she wondered. What if there was an emergency? Samson dug the straw into the dirt next to the fence and scooped some up, then blew into the end and shot it out all over the place. Dirt rained down on Sammy's head and sprinkled down her top. He did it again and again. Sammy let him do it until the other woman came over and took the straw away. The woman tucked it in her pants pocket. Don't put things from the ground in your mouth. That's not nice. Samson picked up a fistful of dirt and held it over his mother's head. He opened his fingers slowly and let the dirt land where it wanted. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rory.
Thank you, Kristen. Before we were live, Rory was saying that after that she read that excerpt, she couldn't read more of the book, and I think that's apt for all of us. You can see why Riverhead took you away from Tin House, among other reasons, right? But, thank you, Kristen. I can't wait to read the entire book. Up next this evening, we have Brandon Taylor. And Brandon is another one I'm proud to say is coming full circle this evening, having been a scholarship recipient to Tin House a few years ago. And I still remember picking Brandon up in a golf cart and having a conversation with him as we rolled through the Reed College campus. And I can't quite recall what we talked about, but I remember when Brandon got out of the golf cart having a feeling of just wanting that person to be a friend. So I'm happy to have him back here tonight. Brandon, of course, is the author of Real Life, a New York Times Editor's Choice. His work has appeared in Guernica, American Short Fiction, Gulf Coast, BuzzFeed Reader, and elsewhere. And he's the senior editor of Electrical Literature's Recommended Reading. And he is absolutely one of the best people you could ever have introducing your work. I love his introductions on that site. And he's also a staff writer at LitHub. The playwright Jeremy O. Harris, writing in the New York Times, says of Taylor's writing, he excavates the profound from the mundane. And I think this is really true of everything Brandon does. He has that rare ability to add magic and brilliance and life to every tweet, conversation, and sentence that he puts down. His is a voice that I hope I get to hear and read for the rest of my life. It is that golden. Brandon Taylor, very happy to welcome you back to Tin House.
Thanks, Lance. I also remember that that conversation on the golf cart. And I think you told me not to tweet. I think that's what that conversation was about. Lance being like, I know you're a man who likes to tweet, but don't tweet everything you experience or something like that. I'm so thrilled to be here. My time at Tin House was, I said this last night, but like one of those formative, important moments in my life. It's given me so much, including an agent and also so many friends. And it feels quite special to be able to sort of to say that this was the place I taught my first fiction workshop. And yeah, thrilled to be reading with Kristen and Nicole, who I love so dearly. And yeah, so thank you to both of them. Thank you to Lance. Thank you to Tin House. Thank you to everyone who's come out to hear us read tonight. And thank you, Mac and Rory, for making this space accessible to so many. It's special. It feels quite special to me. I'm going to be reading from my novel, Real Life, out, I think 5 months to the day today. And this feels like a very fitting celebration of that milestone in some ways. I'm going to be reading from the middle section of the book, which, as I promised on Twitter, is the only first-person fiction I've ever really written. You don't need to know much, except that it's a monologue narrated by the main character of the novel, Wallace, and it's a response to one of the other characters in the book asking Wallace to tell them something about himself and where he comes from. And so this is what Wallace has to say to that. It stormed all the time, thunder and lightning and wind so hard it shook the trees and sometimes twisted them clean out of the dirt. There was so much rain one summer that we couldn't keep anything in the ground, and there were strange patches of tomatoes and cabbage growing in the briars because the seeds had been swept across the sand by the rain. That's what comes to me first, the scent of the damp earth, the heat clinging close to the ground, and the gray mist rising after a heavy storm. The clouds were purple, black, and gray, softening when the weather broke, and you could tell which way the storm had come from because the trees were still split wide, and there was a path through the woods as if some huge animal had come slinking through them. And on the hill, looking down into the ravine, all that water on the leaves glinted like little stars, little trapped earthbound galaxies flaring into life. Soon the ants came, and they latched on to whatever had drowned in the rain, and they took it off piece by piece. Once there was a rat that had drowned near the corner of the house, its white and gray fur all matted, and the ants were thronging in and out of its mouth like air, like breath made of small dark bodies. Another time there were birds that had been thrown from their nests, skin translucent and blue like fresh ice from a vending machine, their pink mouths flung wide. Delicate little clothes of skin and feather, bones so light that in another life they might have floated away into the sky, riding on currents of warm air, but now splashed in mud and being disassembled by ants, so many of them that they too were a skin, writhing and dark beneath the shadow of the bushes, almost obscured except at the moment of passing when the eye drops down and sees them, and in the body a startled, horrifying jolt that sometimes there is a dying and dead thing already. That's how it was with storms, coming on suddenly and then vanishing, leaving behind dead things wreathed in dark ants and in mist coming out of the trees like ghosts. During the storms themselves, my grandparents turned out all the lights, and we sat in the house sweating and breathing in the dark, trying not to move except for our fingers twisting and pulling at threads in the carpet. Grit slid between our fingers, sticking there when we squirmed and tried to be still. Flies, fat and dark, moving around us, buzzing close to our ears, and we turning to each other, slapping at each other, trying to kill the flies, but missing, them swinging just out of reach beyond us, but close by, so that we could feel them sliding around us, moving close to our eyes and then away again. My grandparents sat in their chairs, eyes pointing out through the window into the gray veil of rain rushing down from the sky, turning white and frothy as it spilled down the banisters and met in great torrents those floody waters from the field and the yard. There was the joining of many waters out there, eddying up the bird bath and pushing hard and steady against the shrubs. When it was over, there would be plums and berries scattered across the lawn, and birds would come swooping, snatching them up and taking them to nests that had been plundered of their contents by the wind. With the storm howling, pushing hard on our windows, we sat and listened. We sat and listened both to the groaning outside, the great tumult of the world beyond, and to the hum of our grandparents, who told us stories or sang spirituals. They told us of the Bible and how the flood had come upon the land and drowned all the wicked, and how we'd be next if we didn't stay still and quiet. They told us how the world was coming to an end soon, that Jesus was coming back and was testing us. The house stank of our sweat and piss, and the bathroom always smelled like shit because we kept the used toilet paper in a little tin can next to the toilet. And in that house, fetid and stinking and sweating, I learned all about the ways that a person can do God great ill, lying, as in the story of the man who had lied his whole life and in the end had been bashed in the head by his wife with a hammer. But before the hammer had come, he had been visited in his sleep by demons, licking, lapping his feet with their horned tongues. And in the end, he hadn't even felt it, the clank of the hammer going into his skull through to the other side, because he'd been lying his whole life, because he'd been using and lying and telling falsehoods, bearing false witness against those in his life and against his wife, that poor woman, wrung clean out of her mind by his lies, so that she didn't know what was coming or going, and in the end, so that she didn't know what was coming and going in the end, and so had reached for the hammer to ease something in herself. You could also harm God by reaching out in the dark for something that was unholy, the shape of another man, for example, as was my case. You get to wanting it all the time, my grandfather said, get to needing it so much you can't do anything or keep a job or a house or a family, and you go out there and you get AIDS, and then it's over, that's it, you die. I didn't need the lights on to know that he was talking to me, talking about me across the space between us, interspersed with blue lightning streaking the sky. No, I didn't need anything to confirm for me. I knew even then that I was going to hell, that I couldn't make sense of the space in me that was supposed to be where God slept. But in me was just a cavity like a tooth waiting to turn to rot, my soul a blackness, a wound gone sour. If you talked while God was doing his work, you were making a space for the devil. If you opened a window while God was doing his work, you were inviting the devil. If you used electricity at all while God was working, you were making a route for the devil to enter your body. Storms were the only consistent church in my life, the only time I couldn't sleep in from sermons or turn a blind eye to God. You can ignore a pastor's words. It is easy not to hear them. But when you see lightning flash or hear thunder crack open the sky, there is no denying God's fury, his power to break the world with very little effort. And when your grandparents rock in their chairs and sing the songs that their grandparents sang, that their grandparents sang, that their grandparents sang, there is no denying the power of ghosts, those who are always among us, moving through air and earth, resting their fingers upon this or that, collecting what is there, depositing what they have no need for. There were storms every day, thunder and lightning, and I learned to make myself so still that I thought I might slide out of my body, thought I might then and there die, cease to be, fold back into this life as if it were a comfortable bed, so perfectly parallel had I drawn this life to the next. Even then, I was spotting and waiting, watching the world pass me by in repeated patterns, the impression of lightning on the window, its shadow thrown long behind it. Once there was a red weather vane in the yard, and lightning hit it, charring the paint, and beneath it there was the shape of a rooster, a huge black rooster that had been made of metal but had been painted. And so all my life I had thought it red, and that in lightning it was burnt pure and clean. It had reverted, turned back to something else, something new. There was a boy then, a boy I liked who lived around the dirt road from me, who lived in a trailer. He was tall and dark and strong, and once I let him take me into the woods, let him climb on top of me, let him spill himself inside of me. And when I went home, bleeding and ugly and dirty, and climbed into the green bin that we kept in the tub because our tub didn't work, and I tried to bathe and tried to clean myself up, there were little birds' nests in the windowsill, and sometimes the babies fell through the mesh and broke their necks in the tub. And I was washing that day, trying to rub at the bruises between my thighs where he had pinned me open with his knees, trying to make it go away, to become my skin again and not bruised, not marked, not streaked in shit and blood and cum, trying to reclaim myself, the feeling of wholeness again before I had been breached, before I had let him breach me, before I had let him shatter the membrane that kept the world out. No, another way, another way. There was a man who slept in my house. He was not my brother. He was not my father. He was not my uncle. He was not my friend. He was tall and black, and his face was like death's face. And I woke in the night, and there it was, hanging over me, a grimacing thing from the other side, hanging low over me. And he took me into his mouth. And I wanted to cry and wanted to shout, but I didn't because I couldn't. And he kept coming back, kept climbing into my bed, except for the last time when my mother caught him and threw him out. And then she turned to me and slapped me and called me faggot, called me sissy, called me everything except son, said everything except I'm sorry that happened to you. But then she had no language for such a thing, no language for apologies, for cruelty, because she had been made that way, because my brother's father was not my father, because my brother's father had done that to her, caught her on the way home from school one day in the kudzu, had dragged her down, had pulled her down with him and climbed on top of her like a common beast. This is the story I know. This is the only version I know that I have from her. She told me that he raped her. She told me that she hadn't wanted children. And her mother, my grandmother, told me that my mother had wanted it, that she had deserved it, that she got what she had coming. So it's not surprising that on the day she threw him from my bed, she slapped me and told me that it was my fault, that I shouldn't have been acting that way, that I was a child and should have known better, but also that cruelty comes this way, visits us, that in our family we are powerless to do anything except open the door and welcome it. And my father, on that same sunny day, turned to me and grinned with his front teeth missing, already decaying on the inside, already breaking down, and said that he hoped I had had a good time, that he hoped that that man now walking down the road, his wiry shoulders swinging, had done something good to me, for me, that he didn't care so much that I wanted men. And I stood there squirming on the porch, feeling bruised and beaten, tall for 9, itching all over. I wanted to get out of my skin. I wanted to forget how in the night the man from the couch had slid the wool blanket back and had come close to me, smelling like oil, smelling like the pond, like the creek, like fish before you skin them, and how he was so smooth down there, had touched me, put his fingers inside of me, and I had lain there sweating, staring out the window into the night where the trees were swaying, and I kept thinking how like dinosaurs they looked. And then he wet his fingers more and put them inside of me, and the bed was creaking while he made room for himself. And then the first ugly heat of being split open, and I wanted to die. Every moment of it, I wanted to die. I could feel myself going further and further away from myself, shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, sinking like a stone, heavier all the time, downward through some vast inner ocean. And his face, that smirking skull's face over mine, swinging into my body, more beast than man. And then it was over. And I was on the porch, just squirming, just writhing, trying to slip out of my skin like those fish do sometimes when you're cleaning them and they are smooth and perfect beneath the scales, as perfect and unfledged as a baby's skin. How at night I was no longer unfledged, no longer pure, no longer untouched, but sullied. Later, when I went around the road to see the boy I liked, to touch his arms when he asked, to press my lips to his neck and to his stomach and to let him fuck my mouth, I thought of all the times they had let that man into my room, my mother out of apathy, my father out of a sick pride, and how this young man now in my mouth, in the woods, on my knees, the leaves rippling in the breeze that smelled like honeysuckle, his skin tasting like soap, how I was down there letting him go at me from the back, gripping the branches, gripping the vines, green whip-like, how I had brought this about, how this desire I felt was blooming, was the blooming of something planted in me, and how God couldn't take it away. I prayed a lot then, layering the words over each other as if they could form a lattice that would protect me. When I let him come on my thighs and when I let him push me down and punch me and kick me and break me, I kept praying, thinking the pain I felt would absolve me and the fire I felt in my guts would abate, would cleanse me, and overhead the trees dappled in sunlight. You can't know how beautiful the sun is there, how it touches everything and soaks it through, succulent like water. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Brandon. The way that the language can embrace you from even across the computer screen. That was beautiful, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, guys.
One of the things that we do at the workshop is we ask both participants and faculty at the end of their time with us, whatever workshop they come to recommend another faculty member or another writer that they'd really like to see come out. And over the last couple of years, I think Nicole Dennis-Benn has been at the top of that list. And so we're really happy to be able to bring her out here this summer. Nicole is, of course, the author of Here Comes the Sun, the New York Times Notable Book of the Year, and a 2017 Lambda Literary Award winner. Her best-selling sophomore novel, Patsy, is a New York Times Editor's Choice and a 2020 Lambda Literary Award winner. I think if she wins another Lammy, she gets a bronze statue of her likeness, so we'll have to wait and see for the next book to come out. Nicole is the recipient of the National Foundation for Arts grant and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and a New York Public Library Young Lions Award. And speaking about her own writing, Nicole said, "I'm telling the stories of my mother, my grandmother, the women around me in a society that was colonized, where we were taught to hate ourselves and the sound of our own voices. To know that I have this power, it's like, let me actually tell those stories we were taught not to share with the world." For the generation that came before, and for those reading your work now, and for readers who will one day turn your pages, thank you, Nicole, for sharing these stories with us. It is an honor to have you close out the first week of our workshop here tonight. Nicole Dennis-Benn.
Hi, Lance. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for having me. Brandon, Kristen, I'm blown away. I'm big fan of you, to both of you. So to hear you read tonight was just amazing. So thank you for that. And thank you to all the participants here from Tin House, especially to my art of the novel writing workshop. Big shout out to you guys. You guys made my week amazing. It was truly awesome. And I wish it was longer, actually. So I'm reading from my sophomore novel, Patsy, tonight. You know, Patsy, many of you know so far, you know, this woman coming to find her place in the world. And so this scene I'm about to read is self-explanatory. So let me not over-explain and go into it soon. There are two types of devil's cold. One in which you cannot bring yourself to leave the room, much less the bed, to do the simplest things, and the other in which you go through the motions in constant stupor. Patsy lies in bed, turned away from the dark, heavy thing that has returned, its shadow dimming the room. With the cover over her head, she closes her eyes, not wanting to see it. God knows how long she has gone without eating. She could die, she knows, though death doesn't seem that scary after all. Not as scary as the dark thing here in America. There are no bush teas for it. No bitter mix of ramgoat roses, rosemary, lemongrass, bissy, and other herbs. No pastor to come with a bottle of sanctified olive oil. No neighbor from the country who can wring the neck of a goat and sever it with a machete for you to bathe in its blood. No time to lie down and let it run its course. She's powerless against it. The real hell is allowing this place to eat you alive, Fiona says to Patsy when she notices that Patsy has been lying in the same spot on the bed inside their studio from sunup till sundown. How many rotations has the sun gone through since Patsy climbed in the bed that night after seeing Cicely? She slips in and out of sleep. She wakes to Fiona shaking her. Patsy, Patsy, Patsy. It reminds Patsy of her daughter's voice, how it would pull Patsy from the lips of a deep sleep. Here, she's in the midst of it, hating it, terrified of it, and yet her only thought is of True, her daughter. During those years, it was the anticipation of going to America to see Cicely that had kept Patsy alive. But what is keeping her alive now? Where will she find the strength that will protect her from the spells? How can she live knowing that she lost Cicely to her American dream? It's then that what Fiona had said about not having the luxury of choosing love that makes sense to Patsy. That's what it all comes down to, choice. When has she ever been given a choice? Never. She was never given the choice to say no the first time her legs were pried open. Never given a choice to rid her body of the grievance she had to carry for 9 months. Never given a choice to look at another woman and allow herself to be carried by the feeling without blood. Bright red on glistening glass, sticking to her like shadow. And now the promise of life comes with accepting that she will never have a choice. So that was the first scene, and I'm going to just get into True, the daughter who Patsy left behind, who comes of age in Jamaica, questioning her mother's abandonment, while she too comes of age as a gender non-conforming person living on the island. So here is True. Even when her former neighbors in Pennyfield say she resembles her mother, True secretly prefers what she has in common with her father. It's hard to see much of Roy these days. He has become scarcer with his intense hours at the police station. Saturdays are the only days True can get herself to wake up and catch him before his early morning jogs. It's 5 o'clock when Roy pushes open the front door in a white t-shirt and a pair of black jogging pants. Marva and Kenny are still asleep, though True hears a sound in Kenny's room and the soft click of a door closing. Roy, wait up, True calls after him, jogging to catch up. She's wearing her t-shirt and a similar pair of jogging pants. From afar, those awake early enough to see them might think they are a father and a son. Since True is now tall, slender, and deliberately flat-chested, her hair cut short like her father's. If you call yourself a champion baller, then you must can run fast, Roy replies, not slowing down for her. He continues to move forward, his head straight. The relationship between True and her father has improved enormously after True began to prove herself stronger and more athletic than her brothers. Roy is never the one to inquire about her homework or exams. He doesn't know about the afternoons she plays soccer after school with Sorefoot Marlon, Albino Ricky, and their friends in that abandoned lot behind Roman Phillips Secondary School in Pennyfield. But he knows how much she loves soccer and how good she is at it. He affectionately calls her Champ. True eventually catches up with him, their shadows elongated as the stars slip away. The only other people awake at this time are the women marching themselves to the market to sell. The sky is a brilliant navy blue, with just the half moon still shining bright. True is aware of their breath sinking and the sound of their light footsteps hitting the pavement. The velocity aggravates the hibiscuses and bougainvillea bushes hanging over fences, wet with dew. Together they run through the sleeping lanes of the Rochester housing scheme. Dogs behind the gates and fences raise their heads and start barking at the sound of their shoes on gravel. They're jogging in the direction of Saxton, a neighboring community where the houses, from the vantage point of the surrounding hills, look like reflections of each other, joined together with their zinc roofs, beige walls, white louved windows, and doors. True is panting, wiping the beads of sweat running down her face. Meanwhile, Roy seems like he could run around the world and back, hardly breaking a sweat. How are you doing back there, champ? He asks when True begins to slow down. She swallows a gulp of air and replies, I'm all right. Good. Race me up that hill. Roy begins to speed up, and True has no choice but to meet his challenge up the incline. It's worth the time with him, she reminds herself. She runs and runs, beating her father to the top of the hill. When she looks back and realizes her victory, she holds up both hands and screams. You think that's something? Roy asks, when he joins her, breathing hard. I beat you, she says, full of glee. Well, let me ask you something. You ever stood up on top of a hill where you can look down upon all of Jamaica, feeling just for a second that you own it? True looks at her father confused. No. He stares at her a moment longer before he says, turn around. When she does, Kingston is a sea of sparkling lights before her. One by one, they flicker off as the sun rises over the wharf. True nearly stumbles backward, awed by the beauty. Roy laughs softly behind her. You can't only think about winning, and when you get there, can't turn around to see what brought you there in the first place. Look at all of this. We take it for granted. True is unable to look away. Seeing the sky this close, she cannot help but utter, we're closer to God. She turns to Roy. That's what she promised me before she left, that she'd move us to a house on the hill. Who, your mother? Yes, True says quietly. Come over here, Roy says. True obeys and stands next to him. He rubs the back of her neck with his hand. She hears him breathing softly. Why doesn't she call? True asks. Who knows? Roy says. She's never heard her father mince his words. She knows how he feels about her mother. She hears him and Marva arguing still about her, about money. True imagines America as a huge, demanding machine her mother deftly tends to. In her dreams, she cries out, Mama! As the machine feeds and feeds, its mouth opening to bite off her mother's head. On those nights, True wakes up crying, angry at the machine, which could not see that she needs her mother, could not spare her. I'm sure they have telephones in a place like that. Well, they got a black man running for president now too, Roy says. Don't mean it won't be easier for black people if him win. In this life, what you see is what you get, Roy says. You see that? He points to where the sun rises like a newly cracked egg yolk. That's a certainty. As long as you're alive, you know you can depend on seeing it every day. You can't place hopes on no one else because everyone will disappoint you. It's life. Get that right, or else you're going to end up mad and angry for the rest of your life. You're not going to have everything handed to you like that. You're never going to have a mansion or a nice car or a servant serving you no ice cold lemonade if you just sit there expecting people to feel sorry for you. No one will ever be sorry. No one owe you anything true, not even happiness. You have to harden yourself, toughen up like coconut to survive this world. Use no delicate woman. So never make me hear you cry like one, expecting people to do for you. Compared to some children, you have a family. Me and Marva are your family, a family that can provide and send you to a good school. That's sweet. But you know what you'll always have, no matter how tough and educated you be? A broken heart. Welcome aboard. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I think I speak probably for everyone. My wife, who's listening at home, just texted me a bunch of heart emojis. So that's the feeling that all of us have right now.
Thank you.
Another round of virtual applause, please, for Kristen Arnett, Brandon Taylor, Nicole Dennis-Benn. It's been a great week here at Tin House for the first part of our workshop. We look forward to have everyone join us next week for our programming, which will feature nonfiction, poetry, and graphic narrative. I hope everyone has a safe and peaceful evening, and good night.